Well, there's something going on behind the scenes. I wish I could explain it. I wish I knew it better myself. I think there's some personal.
Moments ago, deep within the Blue Ridge Mountains, something utterly unimaginable was uncovered inside Eustace Conway's secluded workshop, a place so private that for decades, no outsider dared enter. This hidden world, known only to him, has been the site where the mountain man shaped not just his tools, but the very essence of his legend. For years, that rustic structure remained a sacred secret, its weathered wooden doors firmly closed against the curious eyes of the world. And yet today, those doors have been opened. What investigators stumbled upon inside has shaken even Eustace's most loyal followers to their core. Whispers of disbelief ripple through the local community, a mix of awe and fear, as the reality of what exists beyond the threshold begins to surface. Could this discovery rewrite everything we thought we knew about Eustace Conway? Could the man who has lived in quiet harmony with nature be hiding a truth more strange, more complex, than anyone ever imagined? Stay tuned, because what lies within those walls challenges not just the limits of craftsmanship, but the very boundaries of human understanding. This is not a story of tools and timber, this is a story of mystery, of the unknown, and perhaps, of forces that have silently shaped the life of one of America's most enigmatic figures. The workshop, long off limits and steeped in secrecy, is about to reveal itself, and the revelations are nothing short of astonishing. When the crew finally received Eustace Conway's rare approval to step inside his private workshop, they did not fully grasp the magnitude of the moment. For weeks leading up to filming, Eustace had displayed unusual behavior, a detachment that seemed out of place for a man so accustomed to commanding the wilderness. Once calm, measured, and unshakable, he now appeared haunted, distracted, and intermittently lost in thought. During interviews, he would pause mid-sentence, his piercing eyes scanning the woods toward the hidden building as if he heard whispers emanating from within, voices that no one else could perceive. The crew initially dismissed his peculiarities as nerves, the tension of opening such a deeply personal space to outsiders, but it soon became undeniable, something weighed heavily on him, a preoccupation that defied explanation. Days before the scheduled filming, Eustace began wandering into the woods before dawn, moving along the narrow, winding path to his workshop without a lamp or guide. Locals whisper that he navigated it purely by instinct, his steps guided by memory and something deeper, something almost primal. Stories emerged suggesting that the workshop was far more than a place to craft tools, it was an extension of his being, holding secrets that even he could scarcely articulate. The workshop itself stood about 200 yards from his main cabin, concealed beneath a dense grove of ancient hemlocks. Even in full daylight, the sun's rays barely pierced the canopy, leaving the ground beneath shrouded in perpetual shadow. Its exterior was deceptively simple, logs stacked with precision, a slanted moss-covered roof, a single sturdy door, and a small shuttered window. Forest debris pressed against its sides, as if nature itself sought to reclaim it. To a casual observer, it looked abandoned, a relic frozen in time. To Eustace, it was sacred ground, a sanctuary. For more than 2 decades, the door remained closed to everyone but him. Visitors could explore his cabin, his barns, and the forge, but the workshop was forbidden territory. When asked about it, Eustace would fall silent or redirect the conversation. Those close to him knew better than to pry, this was where his solitude lived, untouched and inviolable. The morning of the crew's entry, a sense of unease hung heavy in the air. Eustace vanished just as the team prepared to depart. Hours of searching ensued, the crew calling his name with increasing concern. Then, without warning, he appeared, silent, pale, and distant. "I've been here the whole time," he muttered, though no one had seen him arrive. As the group followed him down the narrow, shadowed path, the forest seemed unnaturally still. Birds fell silent, leaves hung suspended in the air, and even the wind appeared to wait. Every step heightened the sense of anticipation, the path stretching on endlessly. When they finally reached the workshop, Eustace hesitated, his hand hovering over the door. The hinges groaned in protest as the door slowly swung open, revealing an interior thick with the scent of sap, dust, and aged timber. At first glance, the space appeared ordinary, tools neatly arranged, piles of wood stacked carefully, ropes coiled with precision. But as the crew's eyes adjusted to the dim light, the true nature of the workshop became horrifyingly clear. The walls were covered with carved faces, dozens, perhaps hundreds. Each visage was unique, some peaceful, others mournful, a few so lifelike they seemed to watch the crew with unblinking wooden eyes. One cameraman whispered that the faces appeared to shift with the flicker of light, tracking their movements. The chilling reality dawned slowly, accompanied by a collective silence. An old story surfaced, told by a former apprentice. Eustace had been seen working through nights, muttering about the connection between form and spirit. He had once dismantled an old clock, binding its gears with tree sap and strips of leather, claiming time itself belonged to the forest. The crew, once skeptical, now stared in awe at the walls around them, realizing that the workshop was alive with history and unspoken mystery. The workshop was no longer simply a place for crafting tools, it had become a living archive of Eustace's life in solitude, an extension of his mind, heart, and spirit. The crew felt mesmerized yet terrified, aware they were witnessing something far beyond ordinary comprehension. A storm erupted over the Blue Ridge Mountains, lightning splitting the sky and rattling the timbers of Eustace Conway's workshop. The storm seemed almost sentient, drawn to the structure like a magnet, charging the air with an otherworldly electricity. Even the cameras seemed to hum in response, capturing subtle sounds beyond human perception. A room at the far end of the workshop, one no one had dared to enter, caught the crew's attention. Tension hung thick in the air, instinct told them some doors should remain forever closed. Eustace noticed their unease. His normally calm demeanor had grown taut, sweat slicking his brow despite the cool mountain air. He had treated this workshop as both sanctuary and burden for decades, guarding it fiercely. Yet, today, he was letting strangers step into the unknown. Finally, in a measured, low voice, he spoke, "I see everyone looking at that door. You want to see what's inside?" The crew remained silent. With deliberate care, Eustace pushed the door open. Cold air spilled forth, carrying the scent of earth, dust, and something metallic, undefinable. Inside, the room seemed alive, charged with the history of countless secrets. Animal skulls adorned the walls in precise, ritualistic patterns. Dried plants clung to the rafters, vibrant in color yet entirely scentless. Scattered across the floor were strange, meticulously crafted tools, instruments that defied recognition, each imbued with an air of hidden purpose. The crew felt an oppressive presence pressing in from the shadows, the weight of the room almost tangible. Yet even in the midst of fear, the wonder persisted. Every object, every shadow, seemed purposeful, alive, and deliberate. The workshop had become a threshold, a place where human comprehension brushed against something far older and more mysterious. Exploring further, the crew discovered structures partially concealed by dried vines. Wooden, bone, and stone elements intertwined into forms that defied logic. Some suggested a map, others believed in a machine. Eustace's only explanation was a cryptic work, leaving the crew to wrestle with unease and disbelief. Inside, the air remained cold despite the summer heat outside. Crew members shivered uncontrollably, some felt eyes on them even when alone. Shadows shifted subtly, objects appeared slightly displaced when unobserved. Shelves contained dozens of hand-bound journals with meticulous script, shifting between English and a mysterious unknown language. Glimpses of the pages revealed star charts, sketches of rare and deadly plants, and diagrams that seemed to map invisible energies. Nearby, jars held powders, liquids, and dried substances, some shimmering, others shifting between transparency and opacity. A few seemed to multiply within their confines. Wax seals hinted at secrecy, warning the crew that these were not objects to be handled lightly. Every corner of the workshop presented new mysteries. The space was no longer merely a workspace, it had become a labyrinth, a living puzzle where natural and supernatural elements intertwined. With each discovery, the crew felt both awe and fear. Questions arose endlessly, yet answers remained elusive. Amid the cluttered shelves, the crew discovered cassettes and a solitary wax cylinder. Eustace revealed a decades-long practice, recording the mountain itself, not just birds or wind, but the hidden voices of life when unobserved. curiosity overcame fear, and a tape was played. Initially, the sounds seemed ordinary, wind rustling through the trees, but soon they warped into something impossible. Murmurs shifted, harmonics pulsed with a consciousness, a subtle call and response inaudible to ordinary ears. Crew members experienced disorientation, blurred vision, nausea, throbbing pain in teeth and jaws. Even the air seemed to vibrate. Eustace observed calmly. He knew the forest was speaking in ways long ignored. This was not madness, it was deep observation, communion with the hidden life of the mountain. Near the exit, a carved date caught the crew's attention, 3 weeks in the future, accompanied by the single word, completion. A sense of urgency overcame them as Eustace guided them out. Behind, the room seemed alive, shadows stretched unnaturally, objects subtly shifting. In the days following, dreams haunted the crew, warped forests, trees growing in impossible directions, paths twisting into infinity. The workshop had left its mark, a permanent reminder that some secrets, once glimpsed, can never be forgotten. The moment the crew stepped back into the main workshop after witnessing the secret room, an unsettling sensation gripped them. Shadows, previously still, now stretched and twisted along the walls as though moved by some unseen force. They seemed to detach from their sources of light, drifting across the floor independently, stretching impossibly long before retreating into corners where no shadow should reach. The air thickened, carrying an almost tangible weight, a pressure that pressed down on shoulders and made the hairs on the back of the neck stand on end. Crew members whispered among themselves, each confession more uneasy than the last. They felt eyes on them when none were near, and faint sounds, like rustling cloth or soft footsteps, echoed where no one walked. Eustace, however, remained calm, his expression unreadable. "It's always been this way," he murmured. "The workshop isn't just wood and nails. It watches, it remembers, it responds." A shiver ran through the crew. To suggest a building could have consciousness was one thing, but to witness it, that was entirely another. Their eyes drifted back to the carved faces that lined the walls, noticing now how subtly they seemed to shift. A whisper of movement, a flicker of light, a faint impression of recognition, it was as if the workshop itself were alive, and they were unwelcome intruders in a realm far older and stranger than they could comprehend. The whispers began faintly at first, almost imperceptible. Low, indecipherable murmurs that seemed to emanate from the faces themselves. A face in the corner appeared to turn toward them when no one looked directly, lips forming words that vanished the instant anyone tried to listen. Another seemed to frown, its eyes dark and hollow, following a crew member across the room. Eustace spoke quietly, almost reverently, "These faces, they are records. Not of life as you know it, but of what passes through this place. Memories. Emotions. Time itself." Tension thickened with every step. The crew felt the floor beneath them vibrate subtly, and the hair on their arms stood as if static electricity had risen from the ground itself. Then came the discovery of the unseen door, partially concealed behind a pile of aged timber. It was small, wooden, unremarkable, yet a faint glow and faint, almost musical sounds emanated from within. Eustace froze, his hand hovering over it as if pulled by instinct but restrained by caution. For reasons even he would not fully explain, this part of the workshop had always been forbidden, even to him. Some instinct whispered to the crew that whatever lay behind that door was the culmination of all the secrets in this place. Eustace finally turned to them, eyes shadowed. "Some things," he said slowly, "are not for human understanding. Not yet." Yet his words carried an edge of resignation, a subtle acknowledgement that curiosity would not be denied. The whispers and the shadows, the faces, the moving objects, they were all part of a system, a network of energies connecting the forest, the workshop, and perhaps even something beyond the mountain itself. The forest outside seemed to respond to their presence as well. A sudden gust of wind rattled the outer cabin, leaves twirling in midair despite the stillness. Animal calls punctuated the distance, but not in ordinary rhythms. Birds and insects sounded in patterns that felt deliberate, as if orchestrated to coincide with their every movement. Eustace had spent decades mapping these forces, charting not just flora and fauna, but the invisible currents, the secret energies flowing through the mountain. And the workshop? It was the center of it all, a nexus where the unseen met the tangible, where carvings and instruments translated the forest's hidden language into something comprehensible only to those who dared to observe. Attention returned to the walls. Dates carved in sharp, deliberate lines marked not only the past but also the future. Some were faded, almost lost in the grain of the wood, while others appeared fresh, etched with urgency. One in particular drew their eyes, 3 weeks in the future, beneath which was carved a single word in precise lettering: completion. What exactly would be completed was anyone's guess, but the implication sent chills through the crew. Time here was not linear. Events might already be in motion, outcomes may have been set long before anyone arrived. The workshop itself seemed to breathe. Objects shifted subtly, tools realigned themselves, shadows lengthened unnaturally, light refracted in ways that defied logic. The crew, though unnerved, could not tear their eyes away from the phenomena. Eustace spoke softly, "Everything here exists in a cycle. Every carving, every recording, every object you see, each is part of a greater design. Some things are active, some are waiting. And some are alive." A central artifact, partially concealed beneath a pile of wood shavings, drew their attention. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than a rough carving of a humanoid figure, its features distorted and unfinished. But as the crew leaned closer, subtle vibrations could be felt emanating from it, a low hum that resonated through the floorboards and into their very bones. Eustace allowed them a cautious glance. "It is not merely an object," he said. "It is a conduit. It connects everything within these walls, and beyond." The storm outside intensified, flashes of lightning illuminating the workshop in brief, strobing bursts. Shadows danced across the walls, the carved faces appearing to move in rhythm with the pulse of the storm. One crew member stepped back, nearly tripping over a jar that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Another froze mid-step, noticing a shadow stretch unnaturally along the floor, eventually coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape before dissolving into the darkness. Despite the tension, awe permeated the air. Every discovery, every sound, every movement reinforced the reality that this was no ordinary workspace. It was a living organism, a sentient entity shaped by decades of Eustace's presence, observation, and devotion. And yet, the ultimate secret remained locked behind that unseen door, teasing them with possibilities too immense and too dangerous to confront fully. As the crew began to withdraw toward the workshop's main exit, the room seemed to resist their departure. Shadows lingered longer, whispers grew louder, and the air pulsed with energy. Even Eustace appeared momentarily unsettled, a flicker of concern crossing his usually imperturbable face. It was as if the workshop itself were aware that the boundaries between observer and observed were being tested. Stepping into the fading daylight, the crew glanced back at the building. The forest appeared calm, yet an uncanny stillness suggested that the mountain itself had shifted, that something intangible had been disturbed within the sanctuary. Eustace's words echoed in their minds. "Not everything here is meant for human understanding, yet you have seen enough to witness its truth." And as they left, one final detail caught their eyes: the carvings on the walls, now faintly glowing in the shadow of the cabin, seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, a heartbeat for the workshop itself. They were left with a lingering question: what would happen when the date of completion arrived, and would they, or anyone, be ready to understand what the mountain had been holding all along? The forest whispered around them, alive with secrets that only Eustace Conway had begun to comprehend. And deep inside the workshop, behind doors not yet dared to be opened, the heartbeat continued, waiting, watching, patient, eternal. After days spent exploring the main workshop and the hidden rooms, the crew finally turned their attention to a chamber that had remained largely unexplored, a door partially obscured by stacked wood and shadows, its frame almost blending with the dark timber walls. Unlike the other doors they had encountered, this one seemed to resist their gaze. The closer they approached, the colder the air became, as if the room exhaled frost with each movement. Even the faintest light from the windows appeared to bend around the doorway, refusing to illuminate what lay beyond. Eustace lingered behind, uneasily fidgeting with his hands. "This is different," he murmured. "Even I cannot claim to know all of what it contains." Gathering courage, One crew member pressed against the door, and it gave way slowly, groaning like a living thing. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with dust and the metallic tang of something unidentifiable. The walls were covered with strange symbols, some carved, others painted in faded pigments that shimmered faintly under their lights. Scattered across the floor were artifacts that defied understanding, sharp, delicate instruments that looked almost alive, arranged with a precision that suggested purpose beyond human logic. As the crew stepped further inside, a strange hum filled the chamber, vibrating through their bones and sending shivers crawling up their spines. Eustace explained softly, almost reverently, that these were tools of the forest, crafted to translate the unseen energies of the natural world into forms humans could perceive. Some instruments emitted low, constant tones, harmonics that seemed to interact with the human mind. Crew members felt disoriented, dizziness overtaking them in waves, stomachs twisting, hearts racing unnaturally fast. Every sound was amplified yet subtle, a strange resonance that seemed to pull their consciousness outward, towards something vast and unseen. Eustace spoke quietly, "The forest has its language. It speaks through vibrations, through rhythm, through patterns we rarely comprehend. These instruments, they listen, and sometimes, they respond." The carved faces lining the walls of the workshop had long intrigued the crew, but now they began to realize that their purpose went deeper than mere decoration or even memory. As they studied the faces, subtle movements could be detected, the slightest changes in expression, shadows deepening in ways that suggested awareness. Eustace whispered that the carvings were more than art, they were an archive, a living record of life within and around the workshop. Memories, experiences, interactions, and perhaps even the spirit of the forest itself were captured in those silent faces. It was then that the crew noticed the faintest currents of energy flowing through the room. Air shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that loose leaves and dust on the floor quivered and rose in response. Objects appeared to respond to their presence, a jar might tilt, a tool might shift just enough to catch the corner of their vision, and shadows followed them even when no light source could account for their movement. Eustace finally admitted what he had long hinted at: the workshop was alive, a conduit linking the human and natural worlds. It listens. It adapts. It reacts, he said quietly. And sometimes, it judges. In one corner, newly discovered markings carved deep into the wood carried an ominous warning. Some were ancient, worn with time, others looked as if they had been carved recently, their sharp lines cutting through the grain of the wood. The symbols suggested consequences, even danger, for disturbing certain artifacts or crossing invisible thresholds. Crew members exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that some of what they had touched, or merely observed, might carry repercussions beyond their understanding. Eustace's expression darkened as he warned, "Not all secrets are meant for human hands. Some knowledge can consume, and some can change the world around you."